Day 25. I woke with the taste of metal in my mouth. Not blood, but exhaustion. The kind that lives behind the eyes and makes every thought feel like it is weight. The fighting from yesterday had ended, but my body hadn't accepted that yet. The enemy did not attack at dawn, and that worried me. Instead, mortars came mid-morning. Not many, not wild, just enough to keep us pinned while they did something else that we couldn't see. I lay flat and listened to the spacing, the angles, and the timing. They were conserving ammunition, and that meant confidence. By late morning, the quiet problem made itself known. A runner reached me breathless, eyes wide. "We're low," he said. He didn't have to explain. I knew it was ammunition. Yesterday's close fight had eaten through it faster than we'd admitted. Grenades low, machine gun belts half what they should be, rifle magazines redistributed again and again until everyone had some, but no one had enough. I felt a cold settle into my stomach. Low ammo changes everything. It changes posture, it changes courage, it changes the way men look at distance. I gathered squad leaders and spoke plainly. "Fire only when you see what you're firing at, and no warning shot," I said. "Every round buys a second that we cannot afford to waste." They nodded. No one complained. The men already knew. The enemy sensed it too. In the afternoon, they began probing again, not pressing hard, not committing, but stepping just close enough to force us to respond. A shot here, a movement there. Every time we fired, they pulled back, satisfied with the exchange. They were making us pay for every reaction. Air support tried to answer, but weather and smoke limited what the sky could do today. A few passes, some noise, not enough to break the pressure. By late afternoon, I made a decision I hated. We shortened the line again. Not much, just enough to eliminate 2 exposed positions that had cost us rounds yesterday and would cost us lives tomorrow. Pulling back felt like admitting weakness, but holding ground you can't defend with bullets is how platoons disappear. We moved carefully, quietly, and left nothing useful behind. The enemy did not contest it. That told me they were watching closely. As evening fell, the valley felt tighter than ever. The airstrip below us looked impossibly closer, like something fragile placed beneath a hammer held just out of sight. That night, hunger joined fear, not starvation, but the awareness that resupply was no longer guaranteed. I saw it in the way men chewed slowly, as if trying to make food last longer in their mouths. I lay awake long after being alert, staring into the dark, counting rounds in my head. Day 25 ended without a major assault, but it ended with a truth more dangerous than gunfire. We could still fight, but we could no longer fight carelessly. Day 26. The enemy came after dark, not all at once and not loudly, but the way hunters do when they believe the prey is tired. I felt it before I heard it. A change in the texture of the night. The jungle didn't go silent. It thinned, sounds arrived late. Every rustle felt closer than it was. We were already short on ammunition. That knowledge sat in every man's chest like a stone. Just after midnight, the first trip flare popped on the northern edge. A brief white bloom that turned leaves into bone and men into frozen shapes. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then firing erupted with short bursts and shouting. Grenades cracking close enough to feel in the teeth. The enemy had slipped forward in small teams, using dead ground and smoke left from earlier shelling. They weren't charging, they were trying to unravel us. I was on my feet instantly, moving by instinct more than thought. Orders shouted directly into ears: hold, left, grenades last. My voice sounded strange to me, like it belonged to someone else. In one sector, they got close, too close that shadows were at grenades' distance. A figure rose suddenly in the flare light and dropped just as suddenly. I didn't ask who fired. There was no time for names. The enemy tested us again and again, shifting points, trying to find a seam where low ammunition and exhaustion might open a door. We refused to give them one. Air support was impossible now. This fight belonged to the dark. By the time the sky began to lighten, the probes faded. They had learned what they needed. We stayed alert through dawn, every man wired tight, hands shaking not from fear but from the release of it. When the sun finally crept over the hills, it showed a ground torn up by boots and blood and broken brush. We counted heads, and everyone was there, wounded but still standing with exhaustion beyond anything words can hold. I walked the line in the gray morning light, clapping shoulders, meeting eyes, no speeches, just presence, just acknowledgement that they had done something hard and done it together. Day 26 ended without the line breaking, but it ended with certainty. The enemy knew now that daylight belonged to the sky, and the night would be theirs to test again. Day 27. Morning arrived gray and tired, like it hadn't slept either. The light crept in slowly, revealing what the night had hidden. Churned earth, snapped branches, and dark stains worked into the soil where men had fallen and been dragged away. The air smelled of cordite and damp leaves. My throat felt raw as if I'd been shouting for hours, and maybe I had. No one spoke much. Men sat in their fighting holes, helmets pushed back, eyes unfocused as adrenaline bled away and left only ache. Hands shook when they tried to light cigarettes. One man laughed softly at nothing, then stopped when he realized he was laughing, and that worried me. We counted ammunition again. The numbers were worse than yesterday. Machine gun belts cut short, grenades down to almost nothing, and rifle magazines unevenly filled like teeth missing from a jaw. I reported it upward, calmly, and without drama, since drama doesn't make bullets appear. The enemy stayed quiet all morning. That silence after a failed night probe is heavy. It means they're reassessing, counting, and deciding what price they're willing to pay next. Around mid-morning, mortar fire returned, sporadic but well-placed, not aimed at breaking us, but at reminding us that sleep would be punished. A round landed close enough to wound 2 men with shrapnel. We dressed them where they lay. Evacuation would have to wait. By noon, exhaustion had settled into the platoon like a second skin, and eyes were slower, movements less precise. I rotated men constantly, forcing rest in 10-minute pieces. You don't sleep in a siege, you borrow unconsciousness. The afternoon brought another quiet kind of pain. We buried one of our own. He had been wounded days earlier, survived the night probes, joked weakly in the morning, then simply stopped breathing. The body gives up before the spirit sometimes. We wrapped him in cloth and earth and marked the place as best we could. There was no ceremony, just a salute. War strips things down to essentials. The enemy fired again near dusk. A few rounds. Careless this time, maybe frustration. We didn't answer. Silence could be a weapon too. As night approached, I ordered the line tightened once more, not because we were being overrun, but because tired men need shorter distances between them. It keeps fear from growing teeth. Darkness fell, but the night remained strangely still. No enemy's probes, no movement close enough to hear. Almost as if the enemy was giving us this one night, or preparing for something worse. I lay awake, staring into the dirt inches from my face, thinking of the boy we'd buried and the round we no longer had. Day 27 ended not with a roar, but with something quieter and heavier. And that was loss, the kind that doesn't come from a single moment, but from too many moments stacked on top of each other. Day 28. The morning felt like a held breath that never quite released. I woke before dawn to the sound of movement uphill. Not close, not loud, but constant. Too many feet to be patrols. The enemy was shifting weight again, redistributing strength like a man adjusting his grip before lifting something heavy. I knew what that meant. This was the day they would see how close they could come without paying too much for it. As the light crept in, the valley revealed itself in pieces. Smoke lingering in low places, abandoned structures standing open and empty. The airstrip below us scarred and quiet. No aircraft yet, no engines, just space. We were nearly surrounded now, not in the dramatic sense. No ring of bayonets, but in the way pressure came from every direction. North, east, west, even the ground beneath us felt compromised, as if it might give way. Mortars began mid-morning. Not heavy, not light, but with confidence. Rounds landed just outside our positions, and eventually hitting just inside, not to destroy us, to remind us how narrow our world had become. Each impact forced men deeper into holes already crowded with exhaustion. I moved constantly, voice steady even when my chest wasn't. I corrected posture, forced water breaks, took rifles from hands that trembled too much and handed them to men who could still hold steady. Leadership today wasn't about bravery. It was about preventing collapse. Around noon, the enemy infantry showed themselves again, close enough now that we could hear them moving through brush, close enough to smell sweat when the wind shifted. They didn't rush, they didn't shout, they simply existed just beyond effective grenades' range. And that was the worst part. They were letting us imagine the rest. I ordered no unnecessary fire. Every round we spent today was a round we would not have tomorrow. The men understood. In the afternoon, 2 CIA Air America aircraft tried to break through. Mortar fire bracketed the runway again, forcing one plane to turn away. But the other one committed coming in low, unloaded what it could, and took off under fire, engines screaming like an animal being chased. We waved without enthusiasm at the brave American pilots. As dusk approached, the enemy tried one last push, not a full assault, but a tightening of the ring, a few shots, movement forward with pressure applied evenly, like hands closing around something fragile, and we held, barely. Night fell, and with it came the deepest silence yet, no probing, no shouting, and no digging close enough to hear, and that silence felt final. I lay awake staring into darkness, counting breaths, listening to the sound of my men sleeping in broken fragments around me. I knew some of them were already imagining the morning. Day 28 ended with Long Tieng still in our hands, but the truth had become unavoidable. If the enemy chose to commit fully tomorrow, we would be fighting with almost nothing left to give. We had reached the edge, and the only thing holding us there was the refusal to fall. Day 29. The morning arrived like a verdict. No fog, no mercy. Clear air from ridge to valley floor. The kind of clarity that favors men who already hold the high ground. I woke before the first round landed, heart already racing, body already convinced that today would be different. Around me, the platoon stirred without orders. Everyone felt it. When a siege reaches this point, instinct replaces routine. The first mortar hit just after dawn. It landed inside our perimeter, not by accident, not by drift, but direct. Dirt and rock collapsed into a fighting hole that had sheltered 2 men minutes earlier. They scrambled out, coughing with eyes wide. I pulled them deeper, shoved others forward to cover the gap, my voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. Then the next round came, then another. The enemy had decided, and this was not shaping fire. This was pressure meant to break. By mid-morning, the shelling intensified. Mortars, recoilless rifles, everything the North Vietnamese Army and the Pathet Lao Army can throw at us. The airstrip below us vanished behind dust and smoke. CIA Air America aircraft circled, but did not land. The runway might as well have been underwater. We were on our own. Enemy infantry appeared soon after, not rushing, but advancing deliberately under the cover of fire. They moved in disciplined waves, closer than ever, confident that our ammunition was thin and our nerves thinner. And they were right about one thing. We were almost empty. I gathered the platoon leaders quickly, crouched low, shouting into ears, "Hold fire until you see them clearly," and grenades only if they break the line, and for machine guns to save rounds for movement. These are not brave orders. They're desperate ones. The enemy pressed hardest just before noon. One sector buckled. Not collapsed, but bent dangerously. I ran there myself, bullets cracking overhead, dragging one man back into cover and shoving another forward with my shoulder. For a moment, a real moment, I thought this was where it ended. Then the sky answered, not with finesse, but with fury. The CIA field agents that's been fighting alongside us on the ground here called for the U.S. Air Force for desperate help. B-52 strikes hit the enemy staging areas beyond the ridgelines. Not close, but close enough to matter. The sound was unreal, a rolling, endless thunder that felt like the world tearing itself open. Even the enemy paused, their advance slowed, then stopped. The enemies pulled back just enough, and that was all we needed. The afternoon passed in a haze of dust, noise, and exhaustion. We held what we had. No more, no less. Every man still standing felt wrung dry, like something twisted and set aside. As evening fell, the enemy fire tapered off again, not defeated, not broken, but forced into check. I walked the line at dusk, counting heads with my eyes and my heart. Too many wounded, too few rounds, but our line still intact. Night fell quietly, almost respectfully. I lay awake staring at the earth, thinking about how close we had come. Not to death, but to giving up. Day 29 ended with Long Tieng still breathing, but only because the sky had intervened at the last possible moment. We had crossed from defense into survival, and now, every day forward would be borrowed time. Day 30. I woke up expecting fire. That's what surprised me most when it didn't come. No mortars at dawn, no recoilless rifles cracking from the hills, no probing rifle fire testing our nerves. Just wind moving through broken trees and the sound of men breathing too loudly because they were afraid to trust the quiet. After yesterday, the silence today felt like a trick, so I didn't let anyone relax. Made everyone stay alert, stayed in effect long past sunrise. Rifles stayed up, helmets stayed on, men stayed low. Mid-morning, the radio crackled with a different tone. Faster, sharper, urgent but hopeful, and that was emergency resupply. I almost laughed, not from joy, but from disbelief. After everything yesterday had taken from us, the idea that something might be given back felt unreal. The enemy seemed to sense it too. Mortar fire resumed briefly, not to crush us, but to remind the pilots that landing here was still a gamble. Smoke drifted across the runway. The airstrip looked like a place no sane man would touch. Then in CIA Air America aircraft came anyway, low, fast, committing. We watched it come in like men watching a thrown knife. Mortar rounds walked close, dirt spraying up around the wheels as it touched down hard and rolled without stopping. There was no elegance to it. Crates were kicked out. Wounded were dragged in, with engines never fully throttled down. The aircraft lifted off again almost immediately, clawing into the sky as another round landed where it had been seconds earlier. But the crates were there. Crates full of ammunition, medical supplies, and food. We dragged the crates into cover like drowning men pulling air to the surface. Hands shook as belts were reloaded and magazines refilled. Men who hadn't smiled in days finally let their faces loosen. I stopped one of them and made him look at me. Slow, we're still here, I said, because that was the danger now. Relief turning into carelessness. The enemy did not attack in force that afternoon. They fired intermittently, watching carefully and adjusting their positions. They knew what the resupply meant, and so did we. It meant we could fight again, not boldly, not wastefully, but properly. That night felt different. Men ate more than one mouthful at a time. Wounded were treated properly instead of just kept alive. Weapons were cleaned with care instead of desperation. I sat alone for a while after listening to the valley. The enemy was still there. The siege was still real. Nothing had been won, but something important had changed. For the first time since this began, survival was not just a matter of stubbornness. It had been reinforced. Day 30 ended with Long Tieng still under siege, but no longer starving. And that difference, small as it seemed, was the difference between holding and breaking.